Life is confusing, challenging, difficult, isn't it? Wouldn't it be amazing if we had a certain perspective or certain rule sets that we were able to predictably follow that would guarantee us the outcomes in life that we were longing for? Turns out those principles do in fact exist, and if you study and practice and observe life enough, these principles start to illuminate. You start to figure things out, and there are tried and tested methods and approaches that we can bring towards life which will guarantee our success. Like a cheat code. Within every game is the structure and the rule set that the creators have installed into the environment. And if we can figure out what those principles are, we can essentially find our way through the maze of the game or of life. And this can help us to achieve and be successful in the things that we set out to do. So in this episode, I wanted to discuss the principles of life, how we can use these underlying structures and insights into reality to achieve the ultimate success. My name's Jasper Brown, and welcome to another episode of The Conscious Masculine. Now, I've lived for a long time in my life without having specific principles to follow, and I paid the price. I had relationships fail and blow up magnificently in my face. I had times when I became very ideological. I've joined high control cult-like groups and spent a lot of time getting stuck and getting confused. And I've really struggled with making sense of reality and deciding what I'm going to do with my life. So after a certain amount of suffering and trial and error and stumbling and falling on my face, I figured out actually, hey, there are some rules here. There's some principles that we can actually follow which will help to organize things and to clarify things. And in a certain way, I stumbled on them gradually and slowly. And I'm sure by now you have stumbled on many of your own principles of life as you start to navigate your way through the seemingly never-ending array of challenges and tests and experiences that get thrown at you by life. One of the functions of maturity is that we have more time to learn and become aware and to figure things out. So today I want to discuss what some of the principles, key principles in order to create this success in life are. We're going to be going into some of the topics, and I'll be discussing in depth some of the most important principles that I've found for me in my life. They might be different for you, but these are fairly profound and universal principles that I think everyone can benefit from understanding and integrating and having a relationship with these principles, because you can't really go wrong with what I'm about to talk about. So it's with these principles that we can really move ourselves in the direction of a truly remarkable life. Now, there are many, many more principles that I'm going to talk about here, and you will have your own unique set of principles. But I'm going to discuss why these ones are so important. These ones are validated through my own direct experience. So I have a lot of experience in life that I have been able to engage and decipher and gain insight around these principles. But before we get into the exact specific principles, I just want to highlight how important it is to have principles to rely on, because essentially when we come into life, we know nothing. We're like a blank slate. We're like a computer program, or like a computer itself, the hardware. with nothing installed on it. We're like a blank operating system, no software. And we get imprinted with the patterns, behaviors, models for understanding reality that is given to us by our culture, as well as the family systems in specific nuances in the way that we grew up, the people around us. Largely, this is how we discover and build out our understanding of life. It starts with your parents, extends into your family, you broaden out into school, you start entering and engaging into society at large, you might go to university, and you're basically installed with the programming, the default programming of the society that we grow up in. And yet these principles are never really made explicit, are they? We're never really taught how to discover them for ourselves, how to use specific principles to guide our lives in a beneficial direction. Now, typically this was the role of religion in society. The religious texts and teachings and leaders or spiritual leaders of those religions would be like the moral compass in a certain way, teaching us how to live the good life. But these days, for a lot of people, especially in the West, religion doesn't resonate so much anymore. We're actually moving into an era of science and rationalism, which can be rather dry, analytical, somehow missing the deep morality that we're searching for, which was idealized and personified through the religious teachings. So now we can easily find ourselves in a moral emptiness or wasteland somehow, being unsure of how to actually guide our life towards the most profound and enriching success. Having principles will really tremendously impact your life, decision making, your relationships, and your personal growth and development. So we want to make sure that we have a set of core and foundational principles that guide us in the right direction. So with that said, now I want to introduce some of the key principles that I personally resonate with and find to be particularly empowering in this direction. So the first thing that I want to discuss is responsibility, taking responsibility for one's life and circumstances and education and relationships. And in particular, I want to talk about radical responsibility, which is somehow taking another step forward to assume the complete and utter responsibility of your own life and your actions. The truth being that we live in a time when people are inherently tempted with the idea of being a victim. It's very easy to fall into a certain victim mentality because the world is a cruel and harsh place. There are certain people out there who are acting against us, against our interests, against our survival, and life is very hard. Life is very challenging. And it's easy to fall into a state of despair, feeling that we are somehow at the mercy of life. And yet within that mindset is an incredible disempowerment. Because we give all of our agency and ability to affect change over to someone else. Now, I'm certainly guilty of this myself. It's very easy to be overwhelmed by the odds that are stacked against us and the programming that we've received from childhood, the specific circumstances that we grew up in, the start to life that was given by our parents, the particular character flaws or lacking in education or skill sets or money that we've had access to in our life. And it's very easy to be disheartened by that. And at the same time, no one is coming to save you. No one is going to drag you and improve your station in life except you. No one else is motivated to or incentivized to in any way. Your survival is 100% your responsibility. And the life that you live and where your life goes and what you choose to achieve with your life is 100% your responsibility. Your relationships and the problems that they harbor is 100% your responsibility. Now, that's a part that rubs people the wrong way because it's very easy for us to be judging of the other and blaming them for the mistakes in our relationship. She's a narcissist. He's gaslighting me. This person is abusive. It's not my fault. If only they would change. I'm doing the work. They're not doing the work. So tempting, so much easier like that, isn't it? To blame others for our circumstances or the situations that we find ourselves in. And yet that puts all of the power over to them and makes them responsible. And it's actually incredibly disempowering to do that because then we put ourselves in a very weak position, unable to affect change and yet stuck in a cycle of suffering. When I started to accept 100% responsibility for my life and the circumstances, and especially my relationship and its problems, that's when things really started to shift for me. Because I saw that I couldn't rely on other people doing what I needed them to or what I wanted them to. At the end of the day, all I could rely on was my ability to actually affect change and to shift things in the way that I wanted them to shift. And sometimes this meant becoming humble, apologizing, building bridges, holding space for others to validate their pain. And that meant I had to learn how to hold my own pain and validate my own pain. So it's an inherently difficult process because if you're 100% responsible, that forces you to be a certain kind of person. And for a long time, I wasn't ready to be that kind of person. But eventually I came to a point when I recognized that if I wanted to get what I truly wanted, no one was going to give that to me, and I had to take it for myself. And if we zoom out and start understanding things from a spiritual perspective, if reality is one, then everything you see around you, the people around you, the relationships that you have, the world at large, is a reflection of you. It's all part of you. It's all connected. And our job is to somehow make sense of that and integrate that and start recontextualizing reality and relating to it as it's a part of us. And the more we can take responsibility for that, the more empowered we become. And that leads us out of this victim mentality and towards a massive state of empowerment, as well as a deep and profound understanding. So the next principle I want to talk about is mastering survival. We are all the time engaged in survival activity. It's really important to understand this and to see how this functions. Somehow the modus operandi of the ego is to survive. That's what it's designed as a separate self. Our main priority is to actually maintain survival. The greatest fear that we have is death. And we're striving every day from morning till evening, trying to figure out how to survive. Because the last thing we want is to lose our sense of self, aka death. So we need to see that our entire life is somehow structured around survival. And that's okay. But we never want to be caught like a lion on the savannah who doesn't know how to hunt, doesn't know how to protect himself or his pack. We want to work and dedicate a significant amount of our effort and time in life to actually mastering survival. Not just taking it for granted, not just lazily coasting through life and relying on others to support us. We want to take radical responsibility of our survival agenda and optimize it to a very high degree. Survival is extremely complex, especially in this age where we live as a part of family units and societies at large, which is a global system. We live within a global system of humans surviving. And our survival is not simply putting bread and food and drink on the table. It's surviving socially within our culture and all of the politics and social games that we play in order to ensure our position within survival, our reputation as professionals or within our working environment. You can even consider the things like getting a car or some fashionable handbag or expensive yachts as a part of survival. Even billionaires who have all the money in the world are still trying to survive as billionaires every day. And we all have different survival agendas at play, depending on where we live, how we live, and who we live with. So it's interesting to observe this and realize that if we don't master our survival, we're going to be living a life continuously chasing survival and stuck in survival. And at some point, we want to create a safety net, a surplus of survival resources that we are able to actually focus on something more than survival, thriving, or awakening. So when we zoom out and look at survival from a lifetime perspective, this helps us to understand and put things in the correct order. It's highly recommended in our first 30 to 40 years that we dedicate and focus on survival. So at a certain point, we reach a very comfortable level where we no longer have to worry about putting food on the table. If we can pay the bills, are we going to be able to afford the rent next month? Because that keeps us in a very fear-oriented state where we're constantly just running around, scrabbling, scratching around, trying to make sure that we see tomorrow. And that keeps our consciousness very contracted. And at a certain point, we want to be able to open and allow consciousness and our level of consciousness to expand and blossom so we can reach the highest pinnacles of life. And that will never be possible if we never master survival. We will never simply have the foundation to launch ourselves to the highest levels if we're constantly fighting to survive. This helped me a lot once I understood this, because I realized that I didn't have to rush to awaken myself. I didn't have to sacrifice my spiritual development in order to achieve my survival agenda, because the survival agenda plays a very important role in awakening later on. And my mistake was that I was trying to chase enlightenment in my 20s before I had figured out how to actually survive on this earth. And I was trying to spiritually bypass all of my survival needs. And at the end of the day, I would come back from my retreats and I would be penniless. And that wasn't very conducive to integrating the insights that I was having. So I decided, actually, it's pretty important to figure out survival. Master your survival and then build on top of that. And you'll have a much easier time. You'll have much more stability, much more safety to do deep healing work, to harmonize your relationships, and to then focus on higher consciousness. The next principle I want to discuss is work ethic. It's super important. If you ever want to reach a level of mastery in anything, we need to dedicate significant focus and energy and attention towards achieving certain things. This goes towards the previous topic with survival. If you want to build a business, or you want to be successful, or you want to earn enough money that one day you'll actually be able to have a very comfortable life, to retire, to have certain freedom in the world, to experience everything you want to experience on the human level, you're going to need to dedicate the next 30 to 50 years of your productive life working and studying. If you want to achieve mastery in anything, you need to at least invest around 10,000 hours of dedicated, specific study towards truly achieving and becoming world-class in something. And if you are going to be working for the next 30 to 50 years, you may as well be doing something that you love. You may as well be honing and educating yourself in a specific area that gives you high value skills and abilities. Not only will it help your survival agenda and put you in a position in life which gives you the capacity to offer tremendous value to other people, so it will support your survival, perhaps even ensure your survival throughout this life. It's also going to teach you incredibly useful approaches towards learning and skill acquisition in general. So if you do it with one specific thing and master something, you'll be able to apply and repeat that practice with other areas of life which become interesting to you. You can devote 10,000 hours to something, master it, and then also branch out and master other areas of life or other parts of reality or things that you really want to work on. And if we want to move in that direction, we need structure. You cannot just put in a few hours here and there once a week when you're feeling like you've got the energy on the weekend. It's not enough. We don't just want to have a busy life running around on a hamster wheel. We want to have a deep life, a profoundly significant and meaningful life. And the best things and the best parts in life require investment over time. Tremendous investment over time. And if you invest the 40 or 50 hours that you do on a week towards something that you're passionate about, that you're in love with, that lights you up and inspires you, then the next 30 to 50 years of your life are well spent. And that will continue to reap rewards and pay dividends for the rest of your life. Now, one area of mastery that I really focus on and identify with is personal growth and development, because that is like an open field, and that's what I study on a daily basis and in my spare time. And I go out of my way to consume a lot of information and hone my practices and skills and give that back, transmit that value to other people and to support the men that I work with. And that in turn feeds me back. It's like a positive virtuous cycle and feedback loop. I put in the work doing what I love. That inspires and helps other people to figure stuff out for themselves, and that feeds back into me, and the cycle goes on. It's very powerful. So hone and perfect your ability, your work ethic, and the things that you want to be masterful in life, and your survival agenda will be taken care of, and life will move in a much more easeful fashion as your results stack over time. That brings me to the next principle I want to discuss, which is life purpose. We've covered some of the contents of that in what I've just said, but it's really, really important that we have some sense of higher purpose and direction with our lives that creates deep meaning and value over time. Ideally, your life purpose is something that you absolutely love doing. It suits you, it suits your character, it suits your persona. It resonates with you and you resonate with the thing that you do, and that allows you to thrive financially and survive in life. Imagine if you could synchronize all of those things. Something that you love, something that truly suits you as a person, and something that helps you to thrive and support your survival agenda. Wouldn't that be amazing? That is something that we focus on very deeply, and I guide you through a lot of practices in the Conscious Masculine course and community that I run. That's a big focus. The next principle is lifelong learning. We need to commit to a continuous state of personal growth and development. And in doing so, we ensure that we are constantly nourishing ourselves, deepening our understanding of life, and focusing on things that are connecting the dots within our mind and helping us to map out a deep understanding, specific skill sets, and high value activities and tools and resources that we can create and use and dispense to other people. Learning in general is an investment in yourself. It's like a continuous investment that pays dividends. It's like you've invested a huge ton of money into a high yield compound interest account, and the more you invest, the more the value of it grows. Learning is the same. You're investing in your ability to understand things. And don't make the mistake that so many of us somehow fall into, is thinking that school and university is a real education. Nothing wrong with school and university. Well, there are many things that could be improved, but that's just the beginning of the journey. The real learning and the real growth and development begins after university, when you start taking the reins and taking responsibility for your own education. And you quickly realize that there's so much important stuff that never got addressed in school or university. So commit to lifelong learning, and it's one of the best investments you can ever make. It's something I'm investing tens of thousands of dollars in every year. It's my own education, because I know that it's the best investment I can make. It's better than investing my money in stocks and shares and cryptocurrency or whatever. I'd rather invest in myself, because there's no risk to that investment. The next principle is emotional mastery. One of the most important principles is to understand and learn to navigate and operate the machinery or the vehicle that is carrying you through this life. And your emotional system and emotional intelligence is one of the core languages, somehow like the code within the system, that helps you to navigate and understand yourself, first and foremost. EQ is also vital if you want to actually build healthy relationships and navigate the complexity of human relations. It's a core quality that we need if we're ever to be in a position of leadership and responsibility for other people. And it helps to prepare us for the higher stages of development and eventually spiritual awakening, because the emotional system is constantly at work, whether you're doing nothing at home by yourself or you're surrounded by people out there in the world, or you are transcending all of it. There will be an emotional component to every experience in life, and the sooner we can develop mastery and awareness over our emotional landscape and the constant cues and feedback that it's giving us about life, the more deep and nuanced our experience of life is. And if we don't master our emotions, they will run the show for the rest of our life, and we will be at their mercy and easily manipulated. If you want to learn more about that, I've also just released an episode on emotional intelligence. So if you want to learn and understand some very deep insights about EQ, go and check that out. The next principle I want to discuss is integrity. There is a tremendous importance and value within this idea of having integrity. It applies to this topic now because the principles that we start to develop and hold dear and treat as important in our lives, we want to actually have a certain alignment with those principles or the core values that we hold inside of us. We want to be in alignment with those. And integrity is the way that we're actually able to remain true to the things that we say or claim, or the values that we try to uphold. And when we're out of integrity with our values, that's like a compass. It's like somehow our integrity is always pointing us towards true north. And when we need to learn how to recognize when we're out of integrity with our values, because that will show us when the ship is veering off course. And then we need to learn how to correct ourselves and come back to what's truly important. This also directly impacts our relationships, because our relationships will be, the quality of our relationships will be a reflection of our ability to maintain our integrity and our commitments to people. I spent a lot of time being very out of integrity, and this is one that I learned the hard way, because for throughout my 20s, for that decade and before that, obviously. I didn't have a good connection with my values. I had very little connection with my boundaries and standards in relationships, and I accepted and tolerated a lot of abuse. And I was also abusive. Not physically, but emotionally. And I made a lot of mistakes. And I caused a lot of pain. And if I had a stronger connection to my values before those situations, I would have made better choices. I would have stood my ground. I would have defended and not compromised the values that I was holding dear. So it is in the absence of our values that we make tremendous mistakes. Many of those mistakes I'm still seeking to repair and still paying for, as they've created deep wounds and scars. And I'm sure you have in your own life many situations where you behaved in a way which was out of alignment with values that you hold or values you would like to hold. So we can already see within this that it's not an easy process, that it's challenging, that it's testing, and it takes time to bring yourself into alignment. So a core commitment that I have, and one of my core values, is having integrity with my values. And that helps a lot to steer me in the right direction, and it makes decision making extremely easy because I know what is in and what is out of integrity for me. But that only became possible because I did the work around it. I'll have a future episode on this topic because there's a lot we could say about integrity and how to approach integrity. And already I think what I shared here is enough to show you that it's a deep topic that requires a lot of exploration and guidance around moving towards. The next core principle I want to talk about is health. Seems like a very obvious one and something I'm pretty sure anyone can agree with, and yet it's a bit sneaky because our subconscious mind is often working against us, but we behave in ways which are inherently unhealthy and yet deceive ourselves or hide from those truths because they're uncomfortable. We want to stay in the pattern. We don't want to make certain sacrifices. Being healthy and taking care of your body and your mind and your emotional system really sets us up for a thriving life. And in its absence, without health, what do we have? Without health, your life is misery. And I've just watched this unfold in a very personal way because I've been sitting beside my father as he passed away, watching as his health deteriorated and he fell apart in a matter of months and eventually passed away. In fact, just last week. And I saw that he was a man who never really focused on his health, not in a deep way, in a superficial way. He never really took care of his diet. He was a smoker, a drinker throughout most of his life, partied a lot, perhaps too much. Wasn't particularly interested in fitness, although he was active. And eventually he got cancer. And so the importance of health has been impressed upon me in a, visceral and very personal way. And it's very hard to do anything in life when your health is taken from you. You no longer have the motivation, the energy, the desire to really focus on your inner development all of your pet theories and passions and hobbies and the joy of life is stripped away as your mortality is basically called into question and put in front of your face. It creates a very specific kind of misery when you are dealing with chronic health issues. It's completely debilitating. And yet that's kind of difficult to contemplate. When we're in good health, we never want to think about bad health. When things are fine, when we're young, we have a lot of grace before our health issues start to catch up with us, as they inevitably do. So seeing health as a deep concept within our lives, it only makes sense if we are intelligent to plan and incorporate that early. Because by the time you start having issues, it's already often too late, as it was with my dear father. Prioritize and focus on your health before you get sick, and maybe you don't get sick at all. General principles that we can follow in the direction of health are the 5 doctors: sun, sleep, nutrition, movement, and contentment. Making sure that we have a healthy, balanced diet, that we're exercising regularly, that we're spending time in nature under the sun, sleeping adequately to regenerate ourselves, and feeling fulfilled in life. This will do a very large degree of the lifting when it comes to health. Of course, if you have unique, specific health problems or chronic health issues, you should definitely seek professional guidance and invest in coaching or therapy or mentorship from professionals, and get on top of that early, as early as you can, and learn to see the small symptoms, because it's in the micro details and the subtle shifts. As we fast forward through time, those things magnify and become bigger and bigger and bigger until, we suddenly get the diagnosis that we've got stage 4 cancer. That's what happens if you ignore the signs. So learning this lesson has been particularly painful and hard for me, but it's also poignant and timely, because the time to focus on your health is now. Don't wait. You gain nothing by waiting. So take that to heart. Very related is the next topic, which is healing trauma. Starting to develop a deep understanding of what trauma is, how it functions in our system, what are the symptoms and signs. Have a basic understanding of how your nervous system functions. Educate yourself about your attachment wounds. Understand the patterns and coping mechanisms that you've developed in childhood from the relationship with your parents. And avoid trying to spiritually bypass all of this stuff by somehow trying to just detach from it or think it's not an issue or downplay it. Trust me, it's an issue for everyone. The sooner you can become aware of it and integrate this understanding and look at yourself and how you function in relationships and connect the dots between how you are now and what happened to you in the past, this will make so much sense, and it will fill in so many of the gaps of your understanding, and it will transform your relationships from just coexisting with other people to a deeply conscious understanding of why you behave the way that you do. And if you can transform the relationships that you're in into a place where you actually heal and help others to heal and to create deep safety. It's incredibly good for your health. And if you're constantly in dysfunctional relationships, obviously it's not very good for your health. Which leads me to the next core principle, which is creating healthy relationships. Because the cost of not having healthy relationships in your life is immense. You can literally pour years and decades of your energy and time, your precious energy and time, into putting out fires, fighting with your partners or kids or parents, getting stuck in traumatizing cycles of blaming and shaming and conflict, which doesn't get you anywhere. It's looping in wounded patterns, with all of your energy getting like sucked down into petty human bullshit. And we don't want that. That time could obviously be better spent. So this is something I experienced firsthand as well, is the cost of not having healthy relationships and seeing how all of my energy got sucked down and all of those years wasted. Not entirely wasted, because I learned some valuable lessons, but not fulfilling in the way that I wanted it to be. So make this a priority in your life. Focus on this as a core principle and fix your relationships. Fix your ability to exist in close proximity to other human beings. This means you need to learn how to communicate effectively and consciously. You need to get aware of your needs, standards, and boundaries in relationships. You want to understand your attachments, your trauma, your wounded patterns and coping mechanisms, and you want to develop a deep approach and reverence towards intimacy. Learn how to create deep emotional intimacy with others. And learn how to make love in a profoundly healing and transformative way. So you can share the deepest intimacy that you can achieve with another human being and have that as the epicenter of your relationship. It's there. It's one of the most enjoyable experiences we have in life with another person. Why not study it and master it? Why not focus on it and maximize it so you can enjoy it to the fullest? Wouldn't that improve the quality of your life? And in general, the relationships that we have are just a tremendous asset and resource that supports our personal growth and development and our conscious evolution if they're healthy. They become a pillar that like elevates us and supports us. And as I've talked about, my own relationship has become something which is an extremely virtuous cycle. We started off like this, spiraling down and traumatizing each other and creating a lot of pain, but we turned it into this, where now every day we have this profoundly fulfilling interaction that leaves both of us feeling enriched and inspired and like we're constantly learning and learning about each other, learning about ourselves. And it's extremely symbiotic. Imagine if all the relationships that you had in your life were like that. The next principle I want to talk about is understanding ideology and dogma. because herein lies some of the biggest traps that we can fall into in life. We need to understand that our mind has a tremendous tendency to become deeply ideological. At a certain stage of development, that's what a human mind simply wants to do. We would love to just have the answers handed to us. Our mind, so focused on survival, loves to convince itself that it has the truth, that it understands what's going on, and that it knows what's right and wrong. And that is a very, very deep trap that we can fall into. It's essentially why so many people in the world get stuck seeing the world through a religious lens without seeing the inherent limitations within religion. It's also why people get stuck in a scientific, materialistic mindset and fail to see the limitations of science. It's also why people join cults and cult-like organizations, because the mind has a tendency to be ideological. I have spent many, many years in a high control, ideological, dogmatic, spiritual group. And I'll definitely be talking about that in a future episode. And generally speaking, ideology is like grooves in your mind that get worn and they become familiar patterns and familiar ways of looking at reality. The deeper those grooves become, the more locked we get into a specific paradigm, the less open-minded we become. And having a radical state of open-mindedness is actually one of the most important principles that helps us to develop our consciousness and to develop a big picture understanding of life. I'll talk about those in just a second. Study ideology, study dogma, study cults, and understand why your mind wants the easy answers and why it's afraid of doing the hard work of actually figuring shit out for yourself. Don't just believe gurus. Don't just follow everything your teacher or your religious leader or any kind of authority figure or expert has to say, because that's where you get yourself in trouble. That's where I got myself in a lot of trouble, and I learned the lesson the hard way. It's not the best way to approach life. You don't want to be a zealot, just repeating and parroting the words of others. You want to be the kind of person that can figure stuff out for themselves, have their own unique perspective, validate everything they experience or are told for yourself, and to form your own opinion, to have original thoughts, to think for yourself. That brings me to the next core principle, which is raising your level of consciousness. Now, for some of you, this might sound a little bit woo-woo or undefined or unclear what that actually means, but it's very important to understand that there is an evolution to consciousness. There are degrees of consciousness or levels of conscious development. And it's important that you understand where you're at. There are various maps and models which can help us to understand this, and I'll be talking about that in future episodes. But in general, we want to make it a high priority in our life to increase our level of consciousness. Now, there's various different methods and practices and ways of doing this. I'll certainly be talking about that a lot as we move forward, given that that is what this channel is all about. But understand now that your degree of consciousness really dictates and completely defines the kind of life that you live and the way that you interpret reality, relationships, and the meaning of life. The more conscious you become, you will start to relate completely differently to your problems as you see them now, to what's important in life. Your state of consciousness really defines everything about your life. So it stands to reason that the more conscious we become, the more we understand. And the more you understand about life and who you are, the better life gets. So we want to improve, hopefully rapidly, our capacity to become conscious of ourselves, of our relationships, of life in general, and raise our level of consciousness. And trust me, this changes everything. And in fact, don't trust me, test it for yourself. You can become infinitely conscious if you choose. There's no degree, there's no limit somehow to the degree of consciousness that you can awaken in this life. And as you start to do that and have experiences of higher consciousness, words cannot even describe the beauty and joy and ecstasy of ultimate understanding. Now, there's many examples of communities and figures and people who have awoken higher consciousness, and you can study that. You can read a lot of books and educate yourself in a very deep manner about the nature of consciousness and what it means to awaken or become enlightened. And just that alone will change your whole orientation in life and what's important. The last two principles that I want to discuss, first and foremost, the capacity to love. I think this is super important, and it becomes incredibly poignant and important when we start to become more conscious. You realize the necessity of having a deep love and acceptance towards yourself instead of constantly judging and victimizing and villainizing yourself in various different ways and sabotaging yourself, feeling bad about yourself. We want to develop a tremendous capacity to love others and accept others and not stand in judgment, in criticism, in blame. We want to understand others at a very deep level. And as we love them, we also set ourselves free. The more love that we have in our life, the more happy and healthy and wealthy from an inner point of view we become. The more I develop myself, the more I realize that loving, being in love, and receiving love is just, it's some of the most beautiful and heart-opening and precious aspects of life. So why wouldn't you want to enjoy that in the most deepest, complex way possible and study it and develop it? It's just, it will change your life and the lives of everyone you connect with. And that leads me to the last principle I want to discuss, at least for now, today, and that is to develop a big picture understanding of reality. At the moment, we live from a very narrow perspective, seeing life through our tiny little lens, which is informed by the culture that we grew up in, which we're just assuming is correct. But if we look at history, we can see that always looking back, we see how myopic and close-minded and how flat out wrong human culture was at understanding everything. Therefore, it's a big epistemic blunder somehow is to assume that what society understands now is the ultimate truth. It's not. And you can't rely on anyone to give you that. Because how do you know if they're telling the truth? Just because they are a guru or just because they have an academic reputation or just because they are very charismatic and convincing and they bring lots of clever arguments. It's essentially hearsay. You don't know if they're right. And you don't want to leave that up to blind faith. You need to undertake this investigation for yourself and start to try to map out and understand reality and everything under that umbrella, everything that is meaningful and significant for you. And the more you do that, the more satisfying and fascinating and enjoyable life becomes. Because you start seeing things, seeing everything completely differently. And it's not enough to just awaken yourself or have enlightenment experiences. If you don't understand reality and the truth and what's happening inside of you and who you truly are, and you don't have a big picture understanding, you can easily misconstrue your enlightenment or awakening experiences and become a false guru. You can think you've reached the end of the road when in fact it's just the beginning of the road. And there's many, many traps that we can fall into. A big picture understanding helps us to avoid the biggest traps. So we need to expose ourselves to hundreds or thousands of sources of information, learn to decipher and sort the wheat from the chaff, to extract the kernels of wisdom and the droplets of gold from every different perspective and use a multi-perspectival understanding of reality to form our own big picture understanding. And I'll talk more about that in a future episode as well, about the exact process and how we can approach that. So those are the principles I wanted to discuss today. Now, obviously, applying them is a whole different thing. This will be a work of your life, is honing and sharpening and testing and validating these principles for yourself. I don't just expect you to take my word for it. In fact, I strongly encourage you to not take my word for it. Treat everything that I say with skepticism. Also be open to the fact that there might be some profound truth in what I say, but go and validate these for yourself. Turn them over in your mind, journal, contemplate, meditate on these topics, and start creating your own list of core life principles. There's probably many, many things here that I haven't covered which are very pertinent and specific to you. Perhaps family is a life principle for you that you really need to nourish yourself and honor and live in alignment with the principle of family. Just as an example. There are many, many others. We could have written a list of 100 principles to follow, but I wanted to keep this episode fairly short and succinct and just give you the most punchy, profound, and life-changing principles that I've personally working with and advocate for. And just notice that you'll also be working at these for the rest of your life. These principles they're not just something that you focus on now, it's something that you carry with you. And the more you deepen your relationship to these principles, the better they become, the more truthful and embodied, and the more integrity you have with them. Common challenges in maintaining integrity with our principles is obviously life gets in the way, we get lazy, other people are constantly testing and tempting us to bend or be flexible with our principles, and those are the moments when we get tested, and that's when integrity is developed, when our principles are tested. So notice that there will always be tests and welcome those tests. Say yes, embrace this as a challenge, see this as a test of your understanding and your integrity with your principles, and allow that process to shape you and deepen your relationship with your core life principles. So I hope you found this interesting. I really enjoy this topic. I like thinking about it because as a person who's lived for much of his life without having specific principles, when I started to shift things and started to really understand some of these, life just got so much better. Decision making got so much better. My relationships got so much better, and I really started to accelerate my development. And that's what it will do for you as well when you make this process your own. If you want help with this process, the Conscious Masculine online course that I've created, the men's groups that I run, the one-on-one coaching that I offer is all based around these topics, these principles in various different ways, and it's giving structured, guided, step-by-step exercises and processes to allow you to hone and integrate these various different principles in different ways. It's not enough just to mentally masturbate on these topics and throw them around in your mind and do a bit of armchair philosophy. We actually need to do the nitty-gritty work of integration. And that's what my courses and the community that I've built is all about, with men that are taking this work very seriously. You'll find the links for that in the caption below this episode. Have a look. Come check it out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a rating, subscribe or like to support the channel. It really helps, and I really appreciate that a lot. I've got a lot of plans moving forward, a lot of content, a lot of deep topics that I want to explore with you guys and really transmit all of the understanding and nuances and insights that I've been learning through doing this work myself. And I want to give that to you guys so you can also enhance and accelerate your own processes and really thrive through doing this work. And lastly, I just want to say that if we don't consciously engage and create a deep relationship to our own personal growth and development, we simply inherit the generic blueprint given to us by society, and it's not enough. It certainly wasn't enough for me, and that's what started me on the whole journey and path of personal growth and development. And chances are, if you're listening to this episode, it's also not enough for you. And realize that every step that you take, every time you invest in your education, that is the best investment you're ever going to make, and that will pay dividends for the rest of your life. So stay tuned for more of this as we go deeper and deeper and explore these topics in great depth. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.